Hey, friends, it's your girl Meg here. What's going on? I am coming at you today with Wednesday's live video. I'm going to let some people roll in here while we get started. Post this up in a few different places, but what I want to talk to you today about is really centered around self-worth. It's really centered around owning that and getting real with yourself about your self-worth game. It's about, radical honesty. And what does radical honesty look like when you are living that out in your day to day? What does that look like when you're showing up in conversation with yourself? What does that look like when you are really at the bottom of your barrel, right? When you're feeling like you don't have a lot to share, or that you don't really want to get in the weeds with yourself, because it's easy to just look the other way. It's easy to stay ignorant, right? There's a reason that they say ignorance is bliss, because real talk, like, it's easy, right? You can find a lot of people that are just looking the other way, that don't really care about, um, you know, what's going on with themselves, who aren't really up for doing the work. So the post that I shared today, and I'll pull that up, was a quote by Pema Chödrön. And Pema says, the most fundamental aggression to ourselves, the most fundamental harm we can do to ourselves, is to remain ignorant by not having the courage and the respect to look at ourselves honestly and gently. And so when I saw this yesterday, just as I was kind of doing my scrolling through the internet, and hey, Sandy, welcome. If you're here on the replay, hit replay in the comments. For those of you on YouTube or any other platform, welcome. Would love for y'all to join the conversation as well on a replay. And if you're here live, let me know in the comments. But, one of the things that came up for me as I was going through this topic was like, wow, it really is a form of self-harm if we don't show up and have the courage to look at ourselves, right? If we don't have the sacred space that we're holding for ourselves to look at ourselves, but like not with a harshness, right? Not with a not with an intention to harm ourselves, right? It's harm just by not doing it. We don't need to layer on the pain and the misery by saying like, gosh, you don't show up for yourself, you're so shitty, right? And that really brings me back to like this internal dialogue, right? So part of what I shared about this was like, what if we turned our respect and our courage inward? Like, we're often like, oh, I respect other people, I show up and I respect other people, but I'm not getting that in return. Or, oh, I'm so courageous in my relationships, or I'm so courageous in my job, or I'm so courageous in how I show up in all of these other spaces. What if we turned that mirror on ourselves? What would that look like? What would that conversation sound like? And self-reflection is not for the faint of heart. It's not like you sit down with your journal, it's my planner, but same thing. And you're just like, you are the best. I love you so much. Everything's great. Bye. You know, courageous self-reflection looks like you showing up and getting clear on the things that you don't want to talk about. Like, this is what people refer to as like shadow work, right? It's the parts of your persona, your aspect, your spirit, yourself, your inner being that like you are like disconnected with, like skeletons in a closet. You have them over here. What you present is this way. Two different things, right? And so By not showing up and owning both the light and the dark, we remain ignorant to what's actually going on in our human experience, like in our psyche. And how we treat ourselves is a direct reflection of our self-worth, right? So if we're walking around and we're saying like, and like, listen, this is not dismissing that people are shitty. Like, I'm not trying to do any bypassing here, but there is an opportunity for self-reflection here. So if we're out in the world and or we're in our relationships, like interpersonal relationships, close ones, and people are like treating you not the way you know you deserve to be treated, how long are you going to allow that? And what is that allowance perpetuating in your awareness, right? When you say, it doesn't feel good to be treated this way, what if we said that to the other person, but at the same time we said, what things about me am I not looking at to know that I'm kind of allowing this? Like, I'm okay with it, right? Are you being shitty to yourself, right? And that looks like I'm going through a hard time. I'm a fuck up. I'm a loser. I never get it right. I'm not checking the boxes. I'm barely making it. My bank account is low. Blah, 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 blah. What's the story internally that you're writing about where you're at in your life right now? Right? Because empowerment doesn't start with like you getting a nice pat on the back. It doesn't start with like people reflecting your creative genius back to you all the time. It starts with you doing the courageous act of showing up for yourself and exercising a certain amount of self-compassion, because that's self-love, and in self-love is self-worth. So do you see how all of those are linked up? It's like a train chugging through. And it's like, if you love yourself enough, then you can look at yourself with a certain amount of gentleness. And that's really a huge part of this, right? It's not meant to beat you up, but it is meant to be radically honest. And radically honest isn't always without pain or without discomfort or without like kind of the rolling around a little bit of like growing pains. You know, there is no growth, there is no expansion without a little bit of aching and ailing. Like, let's be honest about that, right? So if you're in a spot right now where shit is just not going your way, right? You aren't getting your payments in from your invoices, or, you know, you're making calls to get things done and you keep getting shitty customer service people. How are you showing up into those situations, right? And I'm not saying like give all of yourself over and like plow through your values or like your boundaries, but I'm saying like, what are you feeling before you even get to that interaction, and how does that relate back to how you feel about yourself? And like the best time to really have these reflective moments, in my opinion, are first thing in the morning and right before you go to bed. When you wake up first thing in the morning, before you touch your phone, this is really important, before you touch your phone, before you touch your phone, before you get on social media, before you let other people impact your awareness, what's going on? Good morning, Jenny. What's going on in your awareness? How are you feeling? What does it look like to do a check-in with yourself? Right? What do you want from this day? Where are you feeling uncomfortable? What difficult emotions are living in your body? Where does that live? Oh, your shoulder? Okay, my shoulder's bothering me, but I woke up with that. It's not caused by anyone else. What was on my mind when I went to bed last night? This curiosity that you have with yourself is an opportunity for you to show up and get radically honest with yourself. It's an invitation. And you don't have to get out of bed to do it. You don't have to go to the gym. You literally do not even have to get into the shower. You just have to show up and be in curious conversation with yourself. And if it's hurting, what can you do to tell yourself that it's okay instead of beating yourself up? How can you start to notice the dialogue that's going on in your head? I see a lot of people around this, like on Sunday night, Monday morning, and this used to be me a lot. Oh, it's Monday. I gotta go to work. If you're waking up in that feeling, where is that really coming from? Is that a dissatisfaction with your job, with your commute, or something else? Is that like kind of like the layer of the skin of the pudding and there's some stuff underneath of it? I don't know why I used pudding as a metaphor, but that felt right. um, Empowerment starts with you. By getting curious, you empower yourself to show up for yourself, and showing up for yourself is an act of self love. And an act of self love is an act of self compassion, self worth. And so these things grow on each other, they stack up, right? We don't do any of this personal development work, this, expansion in our awareness by simply just being like, I got to do it all at once or not at all. It's incremental, right? It's like what we talked about on Monday, like developing these habits. So next, right, after we look inside of ourselves, we can then start to look outside of ourselves and be like, okay, I, I, I'm getting curious here. What am I tolerating around me that I'm not okay with? What bad behavior, what attitudes, what language, what patterns am I consenting to that do not align with who I am? And like, listen, I saw this a lot for me. I mean, when I quit drinking, when I did all these other things, when I stopped going into corporate and was still around people that were in corporate, or, was still married to somebody that was in corporate. And saw all of these patterns that I and the people around me had been conditioned with, that like we didn't have any control. We were just kind of like victims of circumstance. I don't believe in a victim of circumstance. That we were tolerating everybody else's bad behavior around us and did not feel empowered in many of the situations. And like that starts sometimes in work and bleeds into your personal relationships, or the vice versa. It starts in your personal relationships and bleeds into your work. But fundamentally, it starts with you. Because when you stop tolerating the patterns of the people around you and you say, I don't want to participate in that, or, wow, I love myself enough to not want to be privy to this conversation. You can start making some radical decisions. And this is where, the development of yourself and getting into relationship with yourself is really, it brings on a level of toughness to traverse, because you're changing, and people that maybe were once in your awareness, or certain circumstances that were once in your awareness, or choices, are not really resonating with you. So you're like, oh my God, I feel so stuck. You're not really stuck. You're just changing, right? And you're just growing. And so this curiosity that you enact with yourself, to honestly and gently review where you're at, where you've been, where you want to go, is an act of deep self-love. It is a courageous, brave act of deep self-love. And it's in this level of, what I would refer to as personal vulnerability, where you get vulnerable with yourself, that you can show up and be in that courageousness with people around you and really stand grounded in your own power. That's empowerment. When you're not looking around you for validation. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Ashley. When you're not looking for validation from the people around you to say, you know what, you're great, and then constantly needing that, that fix, right? Or that external validation. I used to be a person that needed a lot of external validation. I was the type of person that was like, oh my gosh, a people pleaser. I was the type of person that needed to know that I was doing it the right way, that it was done the way that it was supposed to be done, and that it was working. If this resonates with you, if you are a recovering people pleaser, a recovering yes person, if you are a person who is in recovery for perfectionism, you can join me on this too. All of these are self-aggressions, right? All of these are doing harm to ourselves, right? Because perfection is an unreasonable goal, so you'll never get that done. So you're not going to hit the mark if you're looking for perfection. So that's an act of self-harm, because you're just going to continue to feel shitty. Being a people pleaser, looking for that validation, looking for people to be like, yes, you did this. Yes, thank you. You're amazing. When that goes away, what are you left with? Yourself. And if the internal dialogue inside of you is shitty, guess what you're left with? Yourself. A shitty internal dialogue. And I curse and I use all these words because I think it like gets through, like it cuts through the layer of like coddling to say like, this is really important. And if you can't enact radical honesty with yourself, how are you going to show up in integrity in your relationships or in your commitments, or to own that like, oh, gasp, oh my gosh, you might be changing? Because real talk, here it is, you are a spiritual being in a human body rocketing through the outer space on a giant rock lit by a giant star. Like, there are so many things out of your control. There is one thing you can control, and it's you. How you show up, how you honor what's important to you, and how you speak to yourself, how you love yourself. And how much you love yourself is, I think, in direct proportion to how much love you can give to the world. Right? Because then you give that and that comes back to you. So now you're loving yourself and you're getting it back, and you're loving yourself and you're getting it back. It reminds me of the star card in tarot, where there's two rivers and there's this figure and they're pouring from one into another and then pouring into the rivers. And it's like there is this continuation of it, but it starts with you. So you can't give anything if you have nothing left to give. If Shelley says here, people pleaser, codependent. I'm recovering codependent. If you are giving everything to everybody else around you and trying to pull the strings on everybody's life except your own, guess what you're going to get? Empty cup. I got a full coffee cup here, though. You're going to get an empty cup. My coach Jenny, who's here with us today, she was like, you got to put on other people's oxygen masks before you put on your own. You got to tend to your own garden before you go out and start sprinkling other people's. Right? Because I'll tell you right now, not a lot of those people are going to be coming over to your garden and sprinkling your garden because they're expecting you to come sprinkle theirs. And therein lies this big, big thing about expectations. Right? And if you are all tied up around expectations with if you're a people pleaser, or if you're a yes person, or if you're, battling perfectionism, expectations are something that you're living moment to moment with, even if you don't know it. And the uncommunicated expectations are even the worst, because if you're not in, and there's a difference between expectations and boundaries, right? We'll get to that in a second. If you're running around the world with all these expectations, like, I'm going to do this and it's going to be this way and it's going to come out this way, premeditated disappointment on the end when it doesn't, right? Premeditated resentment when it doesn't go the way you want it to go. However, if your self-worth isn't tied to those expectations, right? I don't need this validation to be who I am. Then on the backside of it, like, it's not going to change, it's just a circumstance. Yesterday, I shared a quote by Naira Wahid. She's a poet, and it said, "Who you are is not where you are, or where you are is not who you are, circumstances." And it's true, but you have to have a grounded sense of self. You have to have self-worth and self-love and be exercising self-compassion to be in that space. Otherwise, like, what you get back is anger and resentment. And that's where this, victim and circumstance thing comes in. Nothing ever goes my way. I'm trying so hard, but I'm not getting it back. Well, yeah, the fuck you're not. Because you're attached to an outcome. And you're never going to be satisfied when you're attached to an outcome. Right? The reward is in your journey, and you have to love yourself enough to show up and be very fucking hyper clear. Like, do not lose me on this. We're going to wrap this up in a few seconds here. You have to be very fucking hyper clear about what you will and will not tolerate. That's a love letter from your boundaries. Boundaries usher breakthroughs. And when you have boundaries, you aren't pushing people away. You aren't isolating yourself. You're saying, and this, I get this from Brene Brown, this is what is okay and this is what is not okay. And by doing that, it is a courageous, honest act of self-love. And all of this relates back to how you speak to yourself. That's where this starts, is a conversation with how you talk to yourself. And it could be the smallest, tiniest thing. I realized years ago, after I thought I had like this self-love game down, that I used to be like, oh, let me tell you a story. I'm a terrible person. Did I actually believe, like, in my core that I was a terrible person? No. It was a defense mechanism for being afraid of being judged. And so when I shed that, I was no longer afraid that people were going to think that I was a terrible person, because I knew that what anybody else thought about me up here couldn't affect how I thought about myself. Because when everybody else went back to their houses or closed their computers and I was laying in bed, good night, Megan, love you. It didn't fucking matter what anybody else thought. Their opinions, judgments, perceptions didn't dictate how much I loved myself. My self-worth was not based on being accepted. Healthy boundaries are key. And they can shift, and they should shift. What worked for you once won't always work for you in the future. But what you can do is honor where you're at right now in this moment. Honor what other people are mirroring back about your light, right? What are they saying in gratitude? It's a reflection of your creative genius. And what are they saying? What are they showing you as far as the shadow? Ooh, not all about this. How do I remove this from my awareness? Let me get clear about what I'm allowing, because what you allow is what you perpetuate. And boundaries will help you stay in your own lane that feels best for you, that keeps you moving in the direction of radical self-love. And so that's what I got for you today, friends. A little Wednesday wisdom here for you. I'll be back on Friday at 12:30. So we're doing these lives Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12:30. 15 to 20 minute live videos here. I also have launched a Facebook group called Be the Beacon, and you can join that just adding it down in the comments. You can click the little link there. If you want to get in there, if you're not in there yet, come join the conversation. Some really radically amazing human beings in there that are just doing the work and showing up to like move themselves down the path to shine brighter. Very, very, very exciting. I'm going to be introducing some weekly complimentary webinars for you to come hang with me and get some clarity on some big topics that I've been hearing from a lot of people. I think the one that we're going to be really working with in the next couple of weeks is overwhelm, right? What I'm getting from a lot of people is, here we are at the end of January, and it's like, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Things aren't going the way I wanted them to go. I have so many things to do. I never recovered from the holidays. Oh, God, taxes, this, that, the other thing. We're going to be talking about overwhelm. We're going to be breaking it down. So you can get some support on that from me. Keep your eyes peeled on this page. Join the group. Get on my email list. Check out my website. Whatever you can do to join the movement. But outside of that, friends, thank you for being you. All the links that you need to join the group, get on the email list, or learn about those upcoming trainings is going to be on this page underneath the comments, whether you're here on Facebook or on YouTube. So once again, thank you for being here. If this was of value to you, please share it. Hit the little share button. Tag somebody you know that could benefit from this, right? Send it in a private message. Let's spread the word about getting radically honest with ourselves and really upping our self-love game in 2019. Sending y'all big hugs, big loves from here in Philadelphia, from me to you. Be good to yourself today, and I'll see you guys on Friday.